Hey everyone, Paul at ISM. Welcome to part 2 of car modelling techniques revisited. So we're back for part 2. In part 1 we dealt with body preparation. So we got the body all de-seamed, cleaned up, ready for primer. We modified it for our side exhaust. Our rear spoiler was modified as well. And today we're ready for primer and base coat. So we're going to get some grey primer down on it and the blue base coat colour as well. I'm going to run through how I prime and paint. Might not be the best way, but it's my way, or the right way even, I suppose. But it is my way of doing it, and that's the way I'm going to go today. It's the only way I can go. So as always, you got any comments or questions, pop them down below and I'll try and answer them. But let's jump straight in and let's get some primer down. Okay, so we did the preparation of the body shell in part 1, and today we're going to prime. We've got Tamiya's Fine Surface Primer, which I've decanted. It's been left to off gas for 24 hours-ish, 12 to 24 hours. We've thinned it about 20% with Tamiya Lacquer Thinner Roof Retarder, and we're going to airbrush it on. Now, I do have a video on the channel covering this, so I'll link it in the description down below. I was going to show it, but as I say, I've already got a video on it, so I'll just link it in the description. And you go and have a watch of that if you wish. You can also use the spray can, and if you want to do that, I've got videos on using that. I've got an RX-7 spray can challenge video, which I'll also put in the description down below. So if you want to use the spray can by itself, you can. Today we're going to use my Water HPC Plus. This is set at about 18 psi. We've got our body shell we prepared in part 1. We've got our Tamiya anti-static brush, and we're going to give it a quick dust over to A, remove any dust, and hopefully B, prevent any more dust landing. And as another key, we're going to dust over air to remove any dust that lands on there in the meantime. So we're going to start off with nice light thin coats. This is the key to any paint, any primer, any paint whatsoever. A nice thin coat to begin with. Now, the atomization of the eye water is very, very fine. So while it looks like it's putting a lot of paint down, it's actually not. Now, the worst thing you can do is try and cover the paint in one go. This isn't the key here. This is going to take several coats, probably 3 or 4 coats of primer to get this covered. We're certainly not aiming to do it in one single sitting. Now, safety aspect here, I'd always wear a respirator. Always put a glove at least on the hand you're going to be holding the painted part with. Please make sure you've got a good extractor if you're painting indoors as well. I've got a Benchvent A300S. Make sure you've got adequate ventilation in the room as well. And make sure there's no friends, family or pets in the area as well. Lacquer paints, and any paints really, are toxic in some degree, some more than others. And personal protection is definitely highly recommended by myself. So gloves, respirator, spray booth, ventilation. Make sure you're not in the room with friends and family or pets. And I would recommend leaving the room after spraying for a little bit. Maybe leave your booth on for a little bit running, or a window open, just to make sure as the paint flashes off, you're not sat there getting high as a kite off the solvents or even the particles floating around the room. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you can use acrylic paints, they're safe. Whilst they are inherently safer because they don't use a solvent, they are still airborne particles, so you don't want to breathe it in either way. So hence why I always stress the use of a respirator. You can pick them up cheap for around £20, and they are definitely an invaluable tool. Now, as you just seen, we put 1 coat of primer down. Didn't go too heavy. We just put a base coat down. Now, on the smaller parts, you need to be a lot more careful and make sure that you don't hose on the paint too much. It's very easy to flood smaller parts because they are smaller. So don't go crazy. The more you use the primer, the more you get used to airbrushing it, the more natural you will feel it doing it, and you'll get a feel of just how much you can lay down with each coat. Now, one thing I do say quite often about the Tamiya spray cans is, although I always like to put a light dusting down first, they do like to go on wet as a final coat. They self-level better, and I quite often find if you don't do that, you can get powdering on the finish. So while you need to go easy at the beginning, once you get that base coat down, you can start putting slightly wetter coats of paint down. Obviously, using a different primer like UMP, you need to take it easy there as well and put a nice light dust coat down. But again, you can build up to wetter coats at the end. If you're using a true automotive primer, they're going to have thinners in it that are a bit more damaging to plastic, so you need to be very careful there, and it's quite often recommended not to put wet coats down using automotive-based paints. We'll let all that flash off for 10-15 minutes. We're back with our third coat now. We've already applied another one. You can see the grey starting to form on the bodywork. Now, primer choice, colour choice is an important thing as well. My three primer colours are white, grey and black. Black I tend to use for metallics mostly, and maybe a dark, really dark purple. White I tend to use for lighter vibrant colours like yellows, reds, light blues, light greens, and grey I use for everything else. It's just simple. If it's a really bright vibrant colour, I go white. If it's a metallic or a really, really dark colour like black or dark purple, I'll go black. Anything else, I'll go grey. Grey is probably the safest colour if you want to stick to one colour, because nearly enough everything will paint over grey, especially the Tamiya light grey, because it is a very, very light grey primer. But you can see here now we're starting to put slightly heavier coats of paint down. We're not going mad. We're just taking our time and going around. Now, what I'll do quite often is put 2 or 3 light coats down. Any imperfections or spot, I'll let the primer dry, take it back over to the workbench and flat back the finish, and that's what we're going to do right now. So whilst I was spraying, I could see some slight imperfections. It could be a seam line you've not removed properly, it could be a bit of damaged paint or plastic, it could be a dust spot you need to remove, anything. But any flaws that you see, the primer will show up a lot more. So it's often good practice to get a couple of coats of primer down, let it dry. This has been drying for a couple of hours now, and then come in and we're going to flat it back with exactly the same sanding pad we used to prepare the body in part 1. And while it looks like I'm going really heavy, there's no real pressure applied. I'm just going around and basically taking back the primer ever so slightly. Now, at this stage, if you burn through, it's not really a worry, because we are going to reprime again in a bit. But I always like to do these 1 or 2 coats. If any imperfections show, I'll stop, let it dry, and then we'll flat it back. But sometimes it is good practice to do this. Not everybody goes to these lengths, and it's something I quite often don't always show in my videos because it does add to the build process. But preparation is key, and literally this is key. This is the primer key for your next surface of paint. So yeah, it's time well spent. Like I say, it looks like I'm going mad. I'm not really. I've just got a good feel on how far I can push the paint, and I'm just taking down that top surface so we get a really nice smooth primer surface. And then in your last few primer coats, you want to get those wet coats down to make sure you get the self-leveling effect of the primer, obviously depending on the type of priming you're using. So yeah, it's literally go around the whole body systematically. Anything you can see, sand it back. Any imperfections, you may find you've left a seam line behind or just something silly like that, and this is your chance to rectify it rather than getting to paint and then you're spotting it. Primer will show flaws. When you're done, get your toothbrush, get it in all your nooks and crannies again to get rid of any sanding dust. I wouldn't wipe it over anything. I'm not a big fan of doing that. Once you've done that, back to the spray booth, same primer again. I've just spotted a little bit of mist. Never too late. It's never ever too late to spot a flaw and fix it. Like I say, preparation is key, and this is probably one of the biggest preparation moments you can do your primer. It's a very, very important stage of modelling, in my opinion. So there we go. We hit it with the anti-static brush again, wiped it over with the airbrush with some air, and we're back again. As you see, we're going a little bit heavier straight away now. We've already got a good base of primer down on the plastic. It's been keyed, it's been flatted back, and what I want to do now is apply slightly wetter coats of primer, let it do its self-leveling capabilities, and then we can leave that to dry. So if you've flattened it back, normally 1 coat will suffice in coverage. If you need another one, repeat. If you need to flat it back again, repeat. You can keep going and flatten back until you're happy. Obviously, with every subsequent layer of primer, you may start to lose detail depending on the thickness of the primer. But don't be worried, and stop in, let it dry, flat it back, repeat if necessary. Like I say, it's quite often a step I kind of not skimp out on, but quite often something I'll miss out on the build videos because it is a long-winded affair, and I am trying to keep the videos to a shorter length. But literally, you can't really go wrong. So we've gone side to side. Alternating passes is always good as well. I like to do one side to side and then one up and down pass. And that way you make sure you're getting all those doors shut, the panel lines, any nooks and crannies, any areas that you might miss. And it's just a case of going around until you're happy with the coverage. Tamiya primer dries very, very fast. Literally, you can sand this in a warm room. If your room's about 20 degrees or higher, you can sand this after half an hour, no problem at all. But I'd recommend leaving it for a good couple of hours before you sand and or paint. That is one thing I'd always recommend. And of course, if you're using a water-based primer, I'd recommend a bit longer because obviously due to the nature of water-based paints, they do take a little bit longer to dry. And just, pay attention to any primers you use there, instructions, and follow them, and you normally can't go wrong. I've sped the last part of footage up just obviously to save a little bit of time, but it's the same with the smaller parts. Just get nice wet coat on. That way the primer self-levels and it will fill any imperfections in the paint. It'll give a smoother surface. And like I say, with the Tamiya primers, I have found I do prefer a wetter coat. It can dry a little bit rough in texture sometimes if you don't get it wet enough. So yeah, just take your time. Like I say, the more you do this, the more you get used to doing it, and it'll just become second nature, and it doesn't become a chore after a while. I really enjoy painting. It's my favourite stage, and as I say about quick drying, this is literally 5-10 minutes later, and this is dry already. So there we are. We'll leave that overnight to off gas. And here we are the next day with our paint. So this is a colour matched paint. It's blue Securico from Citroen, apparently. I got this off somebody, I bought it second hand off somebody with the other set of decals I've got for this kit. And it's a colour custom mix from Zero Paint. So somebody's obviously requested it and it's been made to their specifications. Now, I have tested it on spoon and clear coated it. It looks the perfect colour. And here we are putting the paint down on the car. So what's a HPC Plus again? 16 PSI. And this is Zero Paints. Now, these are hot paints. Most of the car automotive-based paints are inherently hot. It's just by the nature of what they are. So they do need very, very thin coats. Now, this colour is a strange one. To my eye, this paint is not covering anywhere near as thick as it's showing here. The camera really darkens it, so it looks like I'm putting a lot of paint down, and I'm really, really not. If you know me, I know how to paint this stuff. I've had plenty of reactions in the past, and I know to put nice light thin coats down, but for some reason the camera is over accentuating the colour, and it's definitely making it look like it's going down a lot thicker than it is. So the key to this is exactly the same with the primer. First few coats, really nice light coats, just building it up slowly. If you have a problem with it, what it'll do is it goes through the primer and attacks the plastic, and it'll craze the plastic. Now, it doesn't do it all over unless you really hose it on, but it's easy to lose your concentration and accidentally put a little bit too much down, and you'll just see a haze appear in an area. It's really annoying. You have to strip it, sand it back, and start all over. It happens. So trust me, put nice light thin coats down as you go. Now, they don't all do it. Not every colour does it for many of the paint ranges. I tend to find just some are randomly hotter than others. So I just spray them all the same. And all we're going to do is methodically go around the model, again, side to side, up and down passes alternating until we get the coverage we desire. Now, these are thinner paints, just as they are out of the bottle. And I tend to find I usually need around 7 coats of paint. Because we're putting it on so thin, it takes a lot more time to build it up. So be prepared for a good couple of hours of painting sometimes. I often leave it 5-10 minutes to flash off. It does flash off really quick. Flash off is the time it takes the solvent in the paint to kind of evaporate away. And then you can come back in and put another coat down. So again, the more you use it, the more you paint and airbrush, the better you'll get. and the more comfortable you'll get in it as well. But good coverage there. It was nowhere near that good a coverage to my naked eye. It took a lot more coats to get the paint to build up. So it's quite deceiving sometimes, the camera. But it's a beautiful blue, and I've clear coated it already on a spoon. You can see the pipettes next to me. We've been testing the paints, and clear coated, the blue looks absolutely spot on. Of course, while we're doing the body as well, we're doing the actual spoiler, mirrors, etc. And even more importantly on these smaller parts is doing thin coats. It's so easy to put too much paint down on the smaller parts, and if you're going to get any reaction, it'll be on these bits. It always is. So just bear that in mind and just put slightly thinner coats down than you think you're going to need. You will get the coverage in the end, whether it takes 7 or 9 coats. It will cover. Trust me, I've painted enough bodies in my time. But just please put thin coats down on any of these automotive paints. So from Zero, Splash, Gravity, all the major manufacturers of these automotive based paints, just put them on really nice and thin. It's going to take you quite a lot of coats, but it's worth it in the end because you'll end up with a beautiful paint job. So as I say, we're doing the bumpers, everything. I left the bumper up on this because it's going to be blue. It's not masked and painted any other colour, and it will make our masking in part 3 much easier to do with the bumper not in place. So you've got to plan your builds ahead. Have a look ahead at your colours and your decals and think, do I need that on now? Is it going to be painted the same colour? And preparation, again, I go back to preparation all the time, will save you a lot of drama, hassle, and heartache in modelling. It really will. Sounds a bit melodramatic, but it will. Pay attention to your build and you'll have a much more enjoyable experience. And like I say, we're going to alternate between side to side and up and down passes. As you can see, I'm going on and off the air as I go past the model, and I'm starting the air before we get on the model. That way, if you have any needle tip build up of paint, it'll blow it off first. It's a case of just methodically going round. Remember all the nooks and crannies, so you got the tops of the windows, in around those light clusters, in around the wheel arches is something quite a lot of people forget. The bottom of the sills is a really easy place to miss, as is the lower portions of the front and rear bumper. So just pay attention, turn it round, have a look. I will often spray the interior as well around the A, B and C pillars at the top of where the door cards sit, just in case it is going to be body coloured, just in case you can see through past a door card and you're not going to paint it black. That way later on you don't have to mess around getting everything out. Another thing I'd recommend when painting your models is make sure you go through your instructions and check you've got everything that will need to be body coloured. So on this car, I know the roll cage is blue, but we'll deal with that later. The floor pan, I'm not 100% sure yet, I've not looked, but I've got a sneaky suspicion that the floor pan will be blue on this as well. But we'll deal with that later. Because I'm dealing with this in stages for you guys, I'm going to build it in the stages I would. Normally, I would have the roll cage and the floor pan and paint it all together, but I want to show this step by step, so I'm going to do it all separately. And there you go, you see we're getting really nice coverage now on that beautiful blue. And I was looking around for any areas of mist. Another important thing about painting the body is make sure you do all the components that will sit next to each other together. So if your bonnet's a separate part, the same as the bumper and the mirrors, make sure you're putting the same amount of coat of paint on. Otherwise you end up with a difference in colour. And when you start putting the bonnet on or a spoiler on, it can be noticeable that it's a completely different shade of the colour. Trust me, ask me how I know. I've done it before. So it's a step well worth paying attention to. I would say we've got about 6 or 7 coats of paint on there now. We've got some beautiful coverage. I'm just going to finish off and put this last coat on. Like I say, as long as you follow my tips of nice thin coats, building it up. Like I say, the Iwata is different to the Apex. I've still got my Apexes. I've just gone back to using my trusty Iwatas. They atomize the paint differently. So while it looks like there's a lot of paint going down, there's actually not. They're actually quite frugal on paints. So it looks like there's a massive mist of paint going down. It's not, it's just a brush atomizes the paint just a little bit finer. But beautiful colour, absolutely stunning colour. When I first painted it on the spoon to test it, it looked a little bit dark. And I did actually mix my own blue. You can see it on the far left, as well as another colour that went a bit wrong. We'll ignore that one. My blue looked a lot more like the car itself, and I was all ready to use it. It was a mix of TS Tamiya paints, but I already had this blue from Zero on a spoon, and I clear coated it, and it just absolutely changed the colour dramatically. I'll put a picture of it at the end, and you can see it. And I thought, okay, that does look more like the blue, and my blue I mixed looked almost exactly like it too. So shows you I've got good eye for colour. So yeah, quite lucky really that I did test it with a clear coat, because a clear coat can drastically change a paint. But there we go, there's all our painting done. We're going to leave that now for masking. So I'm going to leave that for another few hours before we mask it. Here's the two spoons. So as you can see, we've got the Tamiya on the left and the Zero on the right, and the Zero is quite significantly darker. And when clear coated, as you can see, the Tamiya mix is on the left and the Zero paint is on the right. It's lightened it significantly. And how close are those colours? I've got a good eye for colour, I have to say. So I'm very happy with that colour. Looks spot on to the car. And there we go. There's the body shell all painted up. I'm happy with the colour. It looks good. There's the back end as well. So that's that for today. So we're going to leave that to dry fully, and then we're going to come back and mask it all up for the black paint in part 3. So there we are. That's it. We are painted. Beautiful colour blue. As I just said, literally just said, my eye is good for colour, because my custom mixed paint, which I think was TS23 and 41, can't remember the ratios, I did it by eye, was nigh on spot on for the Zero paint once it was clear coated. So quite happy with that, not bad at all. Big difference in the clear coated Zero paint though, how much it changed that colour. And now I've painted it all. It's actually decaled now, it's over there. It looks absolutely spot on. So yes, it is the perfect colour. I know Zero is offering an actual Shakura Core paint now. I think it's for the Carina on their site. This was custom mixed by somebody a while back, so they obviously plan to build the car. But yeah, paint looks good. Happy with it. Beautiful smooth paintwork. Preparation is key. That's going to be my motto, I think. Take your time on your priming, prepare on the body, and like I say, don't be afraid to go back a step. Don't be afraid to be halfway through your prime and think, that's not quite right, I'll stop. Put everything away, clean your airbrush up, get the body nice and dry, let it flash off, fully dry for a couple of hours, flat it back and start over. I don't mean you have to take all the primer off, but just take it back a step of sanding, get nice and smooth and reprime, so you can get rid of dust spots, hair, any blemishes on the body you might not have dealt with originally, like seam lines or flaws in the body. Anything not happy with, don't be afraid to go back a step and fix it. And there we are. Same with the paint as well. Take your time with the paint. Nice thin coat with any of the automotive based paints. Trust me, many people have been there and been burnt. You can't put these automotive based paints on thick. They are not designed to go on like that. They are very thin paints, and they are quite hot as well. And they don't attack the primer, they attack the plastic. So yes, there we are. Hope you found that useful. As I said at the beginning, if you've got any comments or questions, pop them down below. If you want to support the channel, you become a patron by using the link down below. Lots of benefits of becoming a patron, including a month early access on all the videos, access to an exclusive live stream, Facebook group, Facebook Messenger chat, all private for patrons as well. There's also patron exclusive video builds as well. The Alpha Models Honda Civic is being built. And you keep me going, being able to make videos like this, and your support is greatly received. There's other links down below for buy me coffee and my PayPal me link if you want to make a one-off donation, and there's links to everything down there to do with me. All the Facebook groups, all the products I use can be found down there, in various things. My Etsy store, personal modelling page of mine, my Paul ISM page on Facebook, and even an email address to get in touch with me if you want to drop me an email. Feel free, any questions or comments, to drop me an email. There we go. Hope you found that video useful. We'll be back with part 3 very soon, where we're going to get this masked up and painted and ready for decals.